There are so many banks out there, and you're either choosing what you see or you're going by what people like me are recommending to you. But there are some banks that you may want to choose because of their high interest rates or because they have low fees. So in this video, I have 5 of the best banks that I think have some of the lowest fees but highest interest rates and can be good choices for many people out there. Hey there, welcome to Venture with Jazzy. On this channel, I talk about credit cards and personal finance. And if you like the video, please leave a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I want to also note that even though I find all these banks on this list relatively good, you should still do your own research and make sure you find whatever is better based on your financial needs. So let's start off with the first bank, which is Axos Bank. So Axos Bank is an online bank and they offer really competitive checking account interest rates, which makes them stand out. So let's go over some of the pros. So Axos Bank provides 5 different types of checking accounts, and we'll briefly go over all of these. For their rewards checking account, you can get up to 3.3 annual percentage yield for keeping a balance on that account. And that is as long as your balance doesn't exceed $50,000, which hopefully it doesn't for a checking account. And this checking account only requires a $50 initial deposit. There's no minimum balance requirement, and there's no monthly maintenance fees. Another type of checking account is their cashback checking account, where you can get up to 1% cashback on all signature-based purchases. And the cashback for this checking account requires a 0 minimum balance requirement. As for their golden and first checking accounts, these are more geared towards people over 55 or under 17, and there's some features associated with these accounts. And as for their ATMs, customers do receive unlimited ATM reimbursements with their over 91,000 locations. So those were a lot of the good things about Axos Bank, but let's talk about some of the cons that may be associated with them. So their high yield savings account is actually not very competitive. That has a 0.61% APY, which is kind of funny because usually it's the opposite, with the checking account being lower in interest rate and savings being higher. But then again, there are no monthly maintenance fees or minimum balance requirements. Finally, there are no physical locations because it's an online bank, so that's good to keep note of. So overall, Axos is great if you're leaning more towards checking accounts and would like to do your banking mostly online. Next up, let's talk about SoFi, and this bank has one of the highest interest rates out there. So SoFi is fully operated online, and it has been making waves with their super high annual percentage yield. So customers for the checking account can receive up to 0.5% annual percentage yield, and for their savings account, customers can receive up to 4.5% APY. And the catch is really that you do need to set up direct deposit, where every month you need to have at least $5,000 going into your account, or else you're going to be receiving a lower APY of 1.2%. And SoFi does give you access to over 55,000 fee-free ATMs across the country, which are mostly at Allpoint ATMs. You also get an additional feature where you can get access to your direct deposit up to 2 days in advance. Another thing too is there are not that many fees with SoFi. So you have no minimum balance requirement or monthly maintenance fees, no overdraft fees, and if you have $1,000 or more in monthly direct deposits, you get no fee overdraft protection. Finally, there is another perk with SoFi, which is you can get up to 15% cash back if you get their debit card with select local retailers. So there are a lot of good things about SoFi, but let's talk about what may be the cons about going with SoFi. So for one is you do need to set up direct deposit or deposit $5,000 into your account every month, or else you're not going to be getting that high annual percentage yield in your savings account, but will be getting a 1.2% APY. And then another thing about SoFi is you have to simultaneously get both their checking and their savings account, so you can't get a standalone savings account if you just want to go with their savings. And then another thing too is there are cash deposit limits with SoFi, so you can make 2 deposits per day of up to $500 per deposit and up to $5,000 in deposits per month with cash. Finally, there are some limitations with finding an ATM where you can only get access to the Allpoint ATMs, which are pretty much located in most 7-Elevens. So that was SoFi, and now we're gonna move on to the next bank, which is Ally Bank. So Ally is another bank that is based online where they have competitive interest rates. Plus, they offer a small but handy out-of-network reimbursement for those ATM fees. So let's talk about some of the pros, which include their competitive interest rates, talking about their savings account first. So their savings accounts pay up to 4.25% annual percentage yield. And then as for Ally's checking account, which they call their spending account, they offer a 0.1% APY, which is pretty general for most checking accounts, but that is if you keep your money under $15,000 in that account. There's also no minimum deposit for their spending account, and you do get free checks and a debit card with this account. And Ally has over 43,000 locations in ATMs, which are mostly at all-point locations. And then Ally does have a small but generous reimbursement where if you withdraw from an out-of-network ATM, they will reimburse you $10 a month. And Ally does have early direct deposit where they can pay you 2 days sooner. So those were some of the pros with Ally. Let's go over what might be some of the cons. So for one is Ally is an online bank, so there are no physical locations, so that's good to keep note of. But then I heard that their customer service is pretty good, where you're not waiting more than 5 minutes in order to reach a representative. And then another thing is there's no cash deposits with Ally, and really the only way is to go through e-checks, online transfers, and direct deposits, or wire and mail transfers. So if you are getting a lot of cash, then you might need to consider this. And then finally, there are limited international services. And I did want to point out that a lot of these banks do have this type of limitation, but I made a video about the Charles Schwab debit card, so if you're interested and if you are traveling abroad, this could be a great debit card for you to consider. Next up, let's talk about Discover. So Discover is a large bank where they have pretty much no fees for a lot of their products. They have 1% cash back for their debit card, so let's talk about Discover. So Discover has basically fee-free checking and savings accounts. So let's talk about their checking account first. So Discover's checking account is called the Discover Cashback Checking, where you can get 1% cash back by using your debit card to pay. And you can get that 1% on up to $3,000 in purchases per month. And this is pretty great because a lot of banks out there do not offer cash back on debit card purchases. It's also good to note that Discover has an ATM network of over 60,000 locations, which are mostly located at all-point ATMs. And Discover also allows you to get paid up to 2 days early from direct deposit from your employer. And then finally, talking about fees with Discover, there's basically none, with no overdraft fees, no monthly maintenance fees, no minimum balance, or minimum deposit requirements. So that was the Discover checking account. Let's go over the Discover savings account. So Discover has a pretty competitive high-yield savings account of up to 4.3% APY. And interest rates can be compounded and paid daily or monthly. And I do really like how their website shows you how much money you can get with their interest rates, which can be a big deal if you don't know how this all works. And also, the savings account has no minimum balance requirement, and you don't need to make a deposit to open this account. Also, I wanted to mention that their money market accounts are also not bad, as you can get up to 4.2% APY as long as you have a balance under $100,000, and you do need to keep a minimum balance of $2,500. So talking about some of the cons with Discover, so for one, it's primarily an online bank, so you don't really have that physical presence. Number two is you can't really make cash deposits, which is typical for most of these online banks. And finally, you are limited in international services, as this ATM network pretty much only goes as far as Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Next up, let's talk about Capital One 360. So Capital One 360 is basically a full service bank where you can get checking accounts, savings accounts, you can also get some loans, car loans, and of course, their credit cards. So let's talk about some of the pros with Capital One One starting with their savings accounts. So there's basically no fees for their savings accounts. You don't need to have a minimum balance, and there's no monthly maintenance fees. They also have a really great high yield savings account of up to 4.3% APY, which is pretty good considering how big of a bank it is. And if down the road you decide you don't want to keep all your money on the Capital One savings account, you can move your money around, and there's really no hassle with that. Also, it doesn't matter how much balance you carry on this account, as any kind of balance that you have has the same APY. Next up, let's talk about their 360 checking account. So as for the Capital One checking account, it's not very competitive with their interest rate as it has a 0.1% APY, but then again, it is a checking account. So you really don't have that many fees associated with having the checking account. There's no minimum balance requirement, and you don't have monthly maintenance fees. And then you do get a debit card as well as checkbooks by opening a checking account. And if you're wondering about Capital One's ATMs, there are more than 70,000 ATMs across America that include from Capital One itself, from MoneyPass, and Allpoint. And if you are the type of person who does prefer to carry cash, I want to let you know that cash deposits are possible with Capital One. You can either deposit it at any Capital One bank or at select CVS, Target, or Walgreens and Duane Reade locations. And if you are a teen, Capital One does have a specialized teen checking account where there are some benefits associated with this. Capital One also has a great mobile app, great customer service, and I want to mention that there is a welcome bonus associated with opening their checking account. I will link it down below, and maybe you'll make some money from this. In order to meet the welcome bonus, you do need to make 2 direct deposits worth over $250 each within the first 75 days of opening that checking account. Finally, this one's pretty much a bonus where Capital One has these cool Capital One cafes that have been popping around across America, where you not only get 50% off drinks for being a customer, but also you can get access to their ATMs there. So talking about some of the cons with Capital One is, for one, there is limited physical presence. So if you don't live near a location, that might be something to consider. And then there are limitations for their international services. So if you do want to use their debit card abroad, there might be some withdrawal fees associated with that. So these are overall the best banks on this list. And I did want to mention that there are other great banks out there. For example, if you want to have a great savings account, Amex could be a great option, but then again, Amex doesn't have a checking account, so it couldn't make this list. And then I also want to mention that maybe some of the APYs, the interest rates, they will change over time. So please don't take those numbers seriously. It's just what it is when I upload this video. And then finally, I did want to include some of the sign-up bonuses that I could find associated with opening these types of accounts. They're not affiliated, but just want to get you the best offers that I can find. And last but not least, please do your own research when choosing a bank, because people's financial goals are much different, and maybe the banks will change over time from this list. So anyway, I hope this video helped you all, and please subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in another one. Bye!